AR, VR, and artificial intelligence are changing the way we interact with the world. And Bianca has been leading the way in those regards. She's the founder of BrickRose Exchange, helping businesses use emerging technologies to create real impact in the world around us. She's also a speaker who's spoken at South by Southwest, Digital Summit, and a bunch of other technology platforms. She was also an IT project manager on the Wall USA Today, a Metaverse project that won a Pulitzer Prize in 2018. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, you've worked on the bleeding edge of technology across the metaverse, AR, VR, all of the exciting stuff. What
Mhm.
kind of skills does it take to actually work in those areas?
Oh, wow. That's a trick question. I think that anybody can work in that area. You just got to figure out what is your top skill? What can you bring to the space that is unique, is different, that only like really you can rock in that lane? Of course, there's tons of people doing this work, but everyone has like their own flavor. But to answer specifically, like what types of skills, I would say project management, creativity, some interest in art, either be an artist or have an interest in art, storytelling. A lot of people don't realize like how big storytelling and story development and character development is when you're creating virtual spaces. So any mix of those types of things, I think the most important thing is curiosity. So curiosity and creativity.
Hmm. That's amazing. And to kind of like just peel it back even just a little bit more,
Mhm.
what does that word look like for someone who has only experienced it like secondhand or doesn't even have an experience what that is?
Well, here's the thing. I think more people have more experience than they realize, right? So if you play video games, if you play mobile app games, a lot of the technology is very similar to what is used to build quote unquote the metaverse, right? And so you're walking around every day if you have a phone with basically supercomputers in your pocket. So it's just about, using those devices, even some computers well, not some, most computers nowadays can access like VR based environments. So we're past the days where you need specialized equipment or even specialized skills to be in this space. I think AI has shown us that we can do a lot as long as you have the curiosity and the creativity, right?
And some of the things that have fascinated me, right, about, virtual reality or augmented reality, kind of like those two fields, is some of the use cases and applications, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, some of them are like very practical, some of them are like just exciting, but maybe not as practical. But I think
Mm-hmm.
it's still kind of like just fascinating. And I want to hear thoughts about what some of the potentials are. But for me specifically, like seeing that, I can measure a room just by pulling out my phone, or I
Mm-hmm.
want to buy a TV from Best Buy and I can put that on the wall to see what it looks like, or
Mm-hmm.
I can even do a drip check, right? So
Mm-hmm.
whatever that use case is, at least I'm seeing some of those applications. But what are some of the things that even excite you that maybe are not so mainstream yet?
Oh yeah, I mean, a project that we're working on right now, leveraging AI and VR in a way where you bring people into these digital environments. But for me, the big use case has been like teaching and learning, right? Like imagine like when you were in school, elementary or middle school, or even high school, being able to have like your own tutor that knows you and knows how to talk to you, how to explain things in a way that it makes sense. I think a lot of times when we're in classes, teachers and professors and educators, they have a particular way of teaching. And if they're really special, they can talk to individual students. Most teachers can't do that. And so I'm really excited to see how AI is going to help with personalized learning. So we're doing a lot of that work. So that's the most exciting use case to me is finally being able to give every student the resources and tools they can have to be successful.
Hmm. And I think one of the things is when you say that, because I was kind of like close to someone who was working on a project team around education and how they could use
Mm,
technology there. And I think one of the ways that they described it that was so mind blowing to me, especially in a world where you're having less attention spans,
Mhm.
is being able to make education experiential, right? Where
Mhm.
when we talk about the solar system, it's not just some drawing or something, but like you could almost feel it, right? Of course,
Mhm.
as close as feeling is, right? You could see in different dimensions than you could imagine it. And you see that with 3D movies and things like that. So those applications are very exciting to me.
Mhm.
But kind of like bringing it back to your point about, personalized learning. I think
Mhm.
one of the things that I don't know if it's a drawback or if it's an advantage or something that needs to be worked on. But I remember, like, Afrotech in 2020 or 21, they really,
Mhm.
during COVID, they really tried to do that virtual thing where people were going and meeting people and it was cool. But,
Mhm.
once the world opened back up, everybody want to go and meet in person again because it's the most natural thing.
Mhm.
It's like human interaction, some of the biggest limitation for AR and VR and AI and all these other things? Or do you
Mhm.
think that it could be something that's complementary?
I think the latter, that it can be definitely complementary, right? And so, even using that as an example, we actually have a project coming up where we're doing part of the work inside of a digital campus in VR. And then the very next week, we're meeting with the students in country. And so, even thinking about how to pair them together, I think that there's tremendous opportunity that's out there and that's available. I think that during the pandemic, like you said, we had to use one to replace the other because no one wanted to get sick. And also, that wasn't the responsible thing to do. And so now that everyone's back outside, right? Like, how can you still tie the technology with in person experiences and how can you enrich them? And so I'm excited to kind of see this cohort come together for the summer because we're working in a Caribbean island. And so I
Hmm.
know the students are going to be really excited to like create their little digital characters, come in and meet each other that first week. But they're like, "Oh my God, you're such and such on the platform." It's kind of like when people are playing video games, they have friends for years that they've never met in person, right? And so when they finally get an opportunity to, you're like, "Holy crap, like you're real." And so
Hmm.
hopefully we can still have a friendship.
That is so
Yeah.
cool. That's so cool when you put it that way. So kind of like to take it one step further or to maybe open it up a little bit.
Hmm.
When you think about people getting a start, I know you mentioned some other
Mm,
skills, but how does one build a career? I know like there's kind of like defined pathways, if you like, for project management, but it's not
hmm.
so clear, for example, with AI and how it's so bleeding edge and it's changing so
Yeah.
much. How does someone even just like, put that energy in the bottle and start to figure out what's the first thing to do?
Well, the first thing to do, I can tell you, is figure out like what's your superpower, right? Like, what are you really good at? And then from there, where can you innovate, right? So, for example, there was a young lady who reached out to me. She's a UX UI designer, right? And so she's telling me she's really interested to figure out like how to implement AI in her work. And I'm like, all right, so let's talk about the problem, right? So we know her superpower is that, but now we got to talk about the problem. The problem is that most people go to UX UI designers because they don't know how to lay out things, right? Like they don't
Hmm.
know visually how to put their website together, how to put the mobile app together. Like they don't know what are the things that make for a great interface, right? And how people interact with it. So one of the things I told her, I said, I've been seeing some tools where someone could take a picture of a drawing that they even had on a napkin and it can turn it into a full prototype. She was like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah." So all this work that you're doing manually of like trying to get people to understand design principles and aesthetics, like, yeah, that's helpful for the person who really want to get into like the knowledge of it. But like, how quickly can you create some type of workshop or even a tool that helps people take their idea that they have in their head to like a fully functioning, I would say a MVP, like a really small example of whatever their idea is within probably the end of the day, maybe half a day, maybe in the hour. And so just really finding ways to innovate in your own space, I think that's a good way to start.
Facts, facts. That's a really good way to kind of like, not boil the ocean, but like break it
Hmm.
down into smaller pieces where it's easily digestible.
Yeah.
So for someone who doesn't have any experience in tech, because like we're talking project managers, UX designers, what's
Yeah.
even the first way? So imagine like, I only have a GED. Like how should I think about structuring my tech career or even building towards that?
I think it's still the same thing. Like really understanding what makes you special, like what's your superpower. Because even if you're not in tech, there's still something that you care a lot about, right? So one conversation I was having with my brother who likes to write, I'm like, so are you done writing your book? And he said no. And I'm like, all right, so you know that you can kind of start jotting down some ideas and get ChatGPT or any of these tools to help you like fill in the gaps or at least ask you questions of how to continue your story, right? And
Mm,
so I think it's literally starting from the place of potentially what you love, starting from the place of you see a problem in your community or at work or anywhere, and you're just trying to figure out how to solve it because you care about that thing.
mm,
And then kind of go from there. I think there are so many tools that are out, not just AI tools, but even just thinking about Google just changes search to AI focused search. So now you can
mm,
ask a question and now it's consolidating different hundreds, if not thousands of web pages. But also
mm,
TikTok is being able to surface some tools and just things like that. I think it just really, really starts with curiosity. And then
mm.
someone has to follow that up with execution.
It starts with curiosity and ends with execution. And
Yeah.
I think, like, to be honest, like that's a mic drop moment right there because that applies to every and that all things in tech, right? Like, and
Hmm.
I like the piece that you said about personality. There's actually a new video that I just made. So anybody who's watching this and you're looking for
Yeah.
more knowledge to fill that gap, go check it out. It's basically a video about how your personality can help you pick a career in tech. And one of the things that I say that I think is so profound and so true is, when you, and it's kind of like what you're getting to as well, right? It's like
Yeah.
when you do something that you're uniquely qualified to do, you have an unfair advantage. Like I've had, one of my biggest draws has been to become a software engineer since like that was the first drive
Mm.
that I had before I
Yeah.
got into tech. But I knew like, I'm just not driven to like write lines of code and debug code. Like I just don't have that patience. But when it
Right.
comes to like engaging with people, interacting, like I get really excited. I'm coming to the point where I almost don't have any choice than to get a bit more technical, but still I know that I'm not gonna be the best software engineer that there is, right? Just
Mhm.
because like I'm not super like gravitated towards that. And I think that's something really great that you're calling out because I think many people, because oftentimes where they get information for getting into tech, for example, if I'm a creator who's a software engineer and people
Mhm.
follow me and they listen to what I say, they're more likely to also want to become software engineers. But the point is like, don't be that just because I'm doing that. Take
Mhm.
that knowledge, figure out what it does, what you can do, and then try to pattern it. And the video is like really great because what I try to do is I do like I think Career Foundry has like this sort of personality test, if you like,
Yeah.
and then I took that and paired it with ChatGPT answer that then helped me like refine it. It
Mhm.
wasn't to the point of my specific career, but I feel like if you go that route, you're probably better off than most of us anyway. Because like I went through like a more cruder way to get to this point. So
Mm.
if you take that route, you're almost more likely to get closer than I did, right? And that's the goal. So
Mhm.
again, one more time, I really like that. It's like find what it is that you're good at, right? And then pair that to what it is that you want to do. Because the beauty of it is, and maybe like this is the next question to you. It's like,
Well,
it's
before you
te-
get to the next
go
question,
ahead,
let
go
me
ahead.
say something about your video. I think
Uh,
that it's genius to tell people to think about their personality and map that to technology. So, like for instance, what that could look like is if you're an artist and you really you care about feeling and how people perceive something, being an artist and that directly relates to design work and UX and UI, right? Like you're intentional about communicating a certain story through design or an aesthetic. If you're a person who is just like bah, 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 this has to happen this and this have to win, you're a project manager. Like you're keeping people in check, right? If you're the person that's dreaming about how to make something better, you're a product manager. So yes, that's actually brilliant advice. I wanted to say that before you skipped over to the next question.
and if you're, since we're doing analogies, like if you're the first person to go say, "Oh, where is he at? Let's check this and check that." maybe you need to be in risk management or cybersecurity. If you're a natural detective, that's where you need to be. Go get
Yeah,
somebody with those
that
skills.
that or some type of auditor. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Like if you like to put two and two together.
Investigator of some kind. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, it's so important. And yeah, there's just so much, and it's because like, and that was the question I was gonna ask is when you think about technology before, it used to be that it was an industry or a certain sector, right?
Mhm.
Do you, in your mind, is it still that way today, or is this something that has permeated everything and on all things around us?
That's a great question. And so before I left corporate back in 2017, I was saying then that every company is a tech company at this point. Um, if you're not recording data, you're not using systems, then you're going to be in a group of businesses that are susceptible to not sustaining, right? And so we saw that through the pandemic. There were a whole lot of companies that didn't have websites. So think like local businesses. And what happened to them? They got decimated because they couldn't serve people online. So yes, every company is a tech company at this point.
And you know, it's so interesting that you actually say that. It's like almost thinking with my architecture mind.
Uh-huh.
Even some of those businesses that probably didn't have the best online presence, it
Mhm.
took like a partner like, you know, your Uber Eats and your DoorDash and Grubhub, etc., to
Mhm.
almost build that layer for them where they were then able to profit off of the fact that that
Mhm.
infrastructure was probably not there, or it was there but it didn't scale so well to
Mhm.
where they were able to build an entire business off of it. So even if you don't innovate and take that, somebody else is going to come take that piece of cake and figure out a way to make it work for them. So there's always going to be opportunity, and I think that's the big thing too. It's like on the one hand, it's you can avoid it, but I think the great thing is it's also creating more opportunities, right?
Mhm.
To kind of like use like a mainstream narrative or two of them actually. You see the Saratoga water guy and and Pop the Balloon who just got signed by Netflix, right? Like
Mm.
those are two media phenomena that exist in this space and time that that only exist because of the time in which we exist, right? Like this
Mhm.
ability of technology right now to create this super distribution where everybody's a media platform. So now it's like ideas, maybe not even necessarily ideas, but like outlandish things competing for which can basically grab attention essentially.
Mhm. Yeah, and so hold on. So Pop the Balloon is going to be on Netflix now?
Oh yeah, you heard it here first.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look that up. That's wild.
Yeah, I think it got announced earlier this week, actually. But
Mm,
yeah, it's going to be on Netflix now.
okay.
They basically, and it is so interesting, also, like even from a tech concept, right? Because that's something that it's validation, right?
Hmm.
To your point, they were able to look at the data. They saw the growth pattern. They
Hmm.
did they
Yeah,
based off of that, they went and built a deal around it. So
yeah,
now, even the way as a content acquirer, right? The way they're acquiring content is now data driven. Because if you
yeah.
think about it before, it was people sitting in a room trying to make a decision on what was
Hmm.
going to pop and what wasn't going to pop. That's why you
Hmm.
see some shows getting canceled mid-season or after season one. Why? Because of course, in as much as you think this is a great idea until you validate it, right? Which is like,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
In the real world, you can't really say whether it's good or not. Well,
Mm.
now they can test off of this people, and then when it works, then bring it into the pipeline. And I wonder, like, if people can even do more and more of this, right? But
Mm.
it's so fascinating.
Wow, you said a lot in just that one part. And I think hopefully someone was listening, right? Like if you have an idea, you should be testing it, right? You should be testing it and you should be collecting data. And so that when you get to the end of your test, you can show someone, look, this is how much it grew. This is how many people are watching the content. I think that's one of the areas when it comes to like even advising in the innovation space, a lot of people don't think about data collection, right? And being able to prove out everything to me is an experiment. So you better believe I'm gonna have some data to show you it worked or it didn't.
Mm. And that's so important because, you know, I think my latest role has exposed me. Like I've been in tech for more than 10 years, but I
Mhm,
think not again because I've not been so technical before. I
mhm.
didn't. There was something so basic that I knew, but I didn't really know, right? If that
Okay.
makes sense.
It
And it
does.
was so simple in the sense that like everything is data, right? Like if you think
Mhm,
about it, like there's data stored. So the internet in itself, what it allowed was this
right.
like vast distribution of data, right? Essentially,
Mhm,
you had this portals, and they don't use those words anymore, but now it makes sense, right? Like web portal,
mhm,
which meant that initially this idea was stored in some place. And
mhm,
by going to this online place, you can now open a portal, right, into this data, right?
mhm,
That then showed you based on whatever they structured it. So this is and then you have like your HTML, your H1s, H2s, right? Somebody went in and built a structure of how this information is presented to you,
right.
right? Of course, there's been so much, you know, growth and personalization to where like two people could be looking at the same exact web page, but it's not the same exact web page because it's been tuned for the best example of that is Netflix, right?
Mhm,
If I like horror movies and stuff like that and I'm looking at a new show, they'll probably serve me, the horror looking version of that same thumbnail, right? Versus like if I'm someone who likes action, they'll look for so same exact movie, but we're having two different experiences because of personalization. So those are improvements, but essentially that is still the same exact problem, right? How do we catalog and show this ideas to people? So essentially it's data in on one side, data in on the other side. And when we think about AI, it's still kind of like the same concept. So going back to just your experience of being on the bleeding edge, because I think that's what it really excites me the most, right? Um, we hear about AI taking everybody's jobs. What's your take on that?
I don't think that's true. I think the people who know how to use AI is going to take up a lot of people's jobs. I think that people need to start really looking at this from a fear-based place, like the Terminator is going to come to your house and pick you up and take you away. It's not that. I think that there was an article that I was reading. Reid Hoffman, who is the co-founder of LinkedIn,
Mm,
there was a statistic in the article that said 81% of workers, I guess in the US, don't use or don't see the need for AI. He says if you
mm,
can't find a way to have AI help you do your work, you're not thinking hard enough. And I
mm,
agree, right? I think that too many people are afraid that it's going to take their job, but in that fear, they're going to lose it anyway because they're going to be somebody else who's going to come up with an algorithm that's going to come up with a series of steps or workflows and build the agents to do your job anyway. So like you
mm,
might want to figure out how to have it help you do your everyday stuff or even things that take you a little bit longer to figure out. I think
mm,
that there's so many applications and I can point to almost any industry and tell you where AI could be used. And
mm.
so
Yeah, yeah, that's actually that's so valid. And speaking of that, like, what is the beginner AI stack like? So I'm coming. Okay, now I hear you. You're preaching, and I hear you. Where do I start? What's the first thing I should do?
this is going to sound funny, but I'm going to say it anyway. Go ask a tool like ChatGPT, right? Like
Oh,
tell it about yourself, right? Tell it about yourself, tell it about what you're interested in, what you do, like whatever you want to figure out how to use AI for, and then ask it, where can I use AI?
mm,
It's crazy because like over the last year, so I have a company that I hire contractors for, right? And
mm,
so sometimes we're in meetings and I'm like, wait, so you did all this by hand? And then somebody was like, yeah. And I was like, why? Like it's taking you so much longer because you're trying to do everything so manually. Whereas you can give it a couple of your original thoughts and points and stuff like that. And you have something in your head, it's like tell it to structure it like this and see what comes out. Now, if it capture the essence of what you do, then of course you want to keep massaging it, keep putting an original thought to get to a final product. But if it generates something and he's like, that's not even what I was thinking, start over. I just feel like people are going to keep using this excuse and then turn around and look up and realize that they can't get the types of jobs that they used to have because people have figured out how to automate them.
That is so key. And to even add a little bit to that, which is like, of course, around that fear. Somebody actually shared this today, which I agree with. So it's two train of thought. One came from someone who has been on us podcast before. Sh- Shout out Victoria, and also Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. So he was saying, like, he thinks that we're farther from AGI, and the reason why he says that is like, human expectations adapt to whatever it exists. I imagine like not and when he said that, like I thought about it because this I've used ChatGPT to its limits to where sometimes I get frustrated because I know like it's giving me a verifiably false response. Right. So I know like it's limited and it's hallucinating and it's giving me all of these things that I know it's not proper. So when I see all these new models or these new image models, like even my expectation has grown, right? Like, so the point is, when we said AGI last year, we meant something different from what we mean by AGI this year, because in our minds, the realm of possibility keeps shifting. And once that keeps shifting, there's also more and more things that needs to be done. And there's also like human expectation, right? Like, you know, if I get hit up by AI recruiter, there's a high percent chance that I'm not going to respond.
Right.
Why? Because I almost think like there's a signal there where it's like, if this company is not going to value my time enough to have a real person speak to me, because this is also the problem, right? It's that
Yeah.
on the flip side of it, the fact that I know you have scale, if you will reach out to 15 candidates before, now you can reach out to 150, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, I'm not, basically you're telling me I'm not special. And like, I'm not going to waste my time and go through all this process only to get disappointed. So even now I'm more picky about what I'm doing. And that's where like the value comes in. It's like expectations will change, reactions will change, the way people respond will change, and AI will need to change to meet that. Plus, just like we just said, like, if you thought about like media outlets in the traditional sense, the way they existed before, we probably had maybe, I'm just gonna make up a number, let's say 10,000 across the globe. That number has probably grown by magnitudes of God knows how much right now because of social media. Everybody's a media
Okay.
platform. Things can go viral in a minute.
Yeah.
What does that look like with AI, right? What more things are people able to do? What more value can people unlock now that they couldn't do before because the technology just wasn't there? I mean, I think about use cases of people who would come to me, in fact, former guests of this show who would come to me and say, oh, I know you talk to a lot of people in tech. As there a software engineer that I could talk to that could help me build my idea? If there's synergy there, they'll go work together and partner and build that. If there's not, maybe that idea doesn't get built. How many of those inventors and creators now can build things with not needing an engineering team and test them out in the world, and they could be successful companies that maybe Microsoft, IBM, in the same way that Netflix is acquiring this content. So, but then now they're going to need salespeople, right? Which means even though AI is taking some jobs, now they need more jobs. They need thinkers. They need builders. They need people who are going to take that idea to like that next phase. And that's what excites me.
No, I agree with you. And I think this is what I love about where we are is like we're starting to automate what most people feel like are jobs that aren't necessarily that valuable. And I'm not talking about like blue collar jobs, right? Trade jobs. I'm talking about white collar jobs too, right? And so I love the idea of someone who has an idea and there's so many tools that are out there to help them bring that idea to life that other people can see, whether or not they have the technical background of like being able to code. Like I think that is so special, and I think it's so special and so needed, especially in communities where they don't typically have the resources to go to college or to learn how to code, or they just is like, you know what, I got this really great idea, like, and they got the drive. So of course it's the curiosity with the execution, right? They have the drive to bring this thing to life. And so I'm really really, really excited about that. And I just hope that for the people who think the Terminator is going to show up to their house, that they give that up, right? And really start to embrace what is possible, because you could
Mhm.
stumble on the next multi-million, if not billion-dollar idea just because you wanted to see if you could build something. So,
Yeah, that's so valid.
yeah.
That's so valid. So, in terms of being, of course, that's your last role. So that's what I'll use, or at least your
Okay.
last role in corporate.
Yeah.
For IT project managers who work in this kind of like bleeding edge areas of VR,
Mhm.
AI, VR, what
Yeah.
is like the starting salary, right? From, you know, getting into the role and potential highest earning potential.
Well, I don't know. I can tell you what I made in my last position. I was in the six figures in USD, right?
Mm,
I was in between, I think like 110 and 125, but that
mm,
was 8 years ago,
mm.
right? And
So that's a
so
long time.
yeah, it was a long time ago. So I don't know what project managers and IT are making now. And so when I came to that organization, they didn't put me in the new hot stuff, not at first, right? It just literally came from me having curiosity. So I like telling the story that the way I got into VR started with me slicing fruit, right? And people are
Mm,
like, what does that mean? And so one day I was leaving the office, or getting ready to go home, and I see a team just playing games with, this is when the headsets were actually connected to computers, like it's called
mm,
tether, right? So
mm,
they have headsets on and they're slicing and dicing. I'm like, what are you doing? So I walk over there, and there's like, oh, we're doing research, we're testing out Fruit Ninja. And I was like, okay. They were like, do you want to play? So I put the helmet on, when I'm in there slicing, I'm rolling on the floor, I'm sweating profusely. Like it was a whole situation, right? And when I took the headset off, I asked them a bunch of questions. I'm like, "What are you doing? What's next? What do you hope to do?" Like I must have stayed for an extra 25 minutes, right? So I leave them. Maybe like a week later, my supervisor goes, "You've been reassigned." I said, reassign where? She said, the emerging tech team. I said, you mean a Fruit Ninja team? So we both start laughing, right? We start laughing because that's literally how it started. Like when I got there, I wasn't supposed to be working on that team. Actually, it was a brand new team. It was an R&D team. But
mm,
because I showed curiosity and I impressed them with the curiosity, that they said to whomever and said, hey, we want Bianca on our team. And so from there, I like researched as much as I could to really understand what products and what projects and what research and what knowledge was already out there around VR, AR, virtual reality, augmented reality, whether or not like there were a lot of black people in it, were there projects with black people or digital characters of black people. Like I went on like women, like I went on this whole thing of like, I just wanted to know. And in that, I had to almost prepare myself to come into a team that had already spent years building video games. So I
mm,
was fresh meat on the team and trying to catch up. And a really cool thing, and I tell people this all the time, this was the first time that I really felt like I was truly embedded into a team. And so our team only had two women on it. It was me and there was another young lady, and everybody else was dudes. But everyone treated everybody with such respect. Everyone was different ages. Everyone was like different racial backgrounds. So it was like a really cool experience of being brought into a team, me doing my own research, everybody being patient with me with all the millions of questions that I had. And so we built three different products while I was there. By the third one, we built that one that actually won the Pulitzer. And that was not our goal. Like our goal was to build something that told a story to possibly impact like funding through Congress. And with that, they're like, hey, this is great. You want a Pulitzer? It was like, sure.
mm.
So it, like I said, all of my success in the innovative space has always come from curiosity and just asking questions of like, well, what would happen if we do this? Or is someone working on that? Let me see if I can find anything. And so that curiosity helped me get into innovation and kind of like, as you say, bleeding edge spaces.
Yeah. And kind of like staying there, I think something that I also wanted to know is like how important is it to to not be afraid, right, of
Oh.
moving into these spaces. And why I ask that is,
Mhm.
without a guest previously on the show,
Mhm.
who works at Netflix now, who she also wasn't a software engineer, and she
Mhm.
only got that role. She's a senior software engineer now,
Mm.
by the way,
Yeah.
because she showed curiosity. She was helping test out features and things like that, and that's how the
Mhm.
team brought her on. So you're like, testament, second testament to just being like excited and how that can
Yeah.
open opportunities. So
Yeah.
what's the right balance of, or should there even be a balance of be afraid or not be afraid?
I would say fear doesn't really help you too much unless you turn that fear into why am I afraid? So if you start asking your question, so asking yourself about the questions about the fear, why you have it, and then you start answering them and then you start addressing it, that's how I think fear is helpful. But generally I don't think it is. I think that I would rather have more curiosity of like, so why did that happen? Um, who was involved, what could we do next, or what could we have done to make this thing better, right? Or what do we need to know before we go down that dark path, right? Like being able to get from fear to like curiosity. There's just so much about being excited about work you've never done and also starting to try to answer your own questions. Like when you show up with that curiosity, with that energy, that willingness to learn and ask more questions, especially when people are creating new stuff, they like that. They like that a lot because they don't have a lot of data points yet. And so being able to be an unbiased voice, especially in a new space, is actually a pretty good spot to be in.
Mm, that's really good. And last one is, I'm kind of like on this topic
Yeah.
for going onto a new team, because I've been there, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to not get afraid when you're going in, but once you get there, because a lot of time you could be intimidated by just how much people who are already in the space know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or just the fact that you're new to all of this. So how
Yeah.
do you navigate that from, not feeling like an imposter to understanding your value and understanding just what do you need to do to become a valuable member of the team?
That's a great question. So I've been playing with this app on my phone called Imprint. It's actually a pretty good app. And so it talks about the first lessons around relationships. And so I'm glad I'm recalling this information down to share with everybody. The first thing you need to do is just be warm. And I know that sounds so like, I don't know, so emotional, but yeah, you showing up to a new team just to like, hey, I'm here to be a part of the team. I want to meet everybody. I'm a nice person. All of those things are ways to get people to like open up to you and to trust you a whole lot faster. The second is once you kind of demonstrated that warmness, like you're a person, you're just like them, you just want to help out, you want to contribute to the success of whatever it is that you're doing. The next is competence. So you got to be warm, you got to be likable, right? Or at least work well with team. But then also when it's time to show like what you got to be competent. Because if you're not, if you're missing either one of those things, your relationship with your team could be what's the word
To
I'm looking for?
deteriorate.
Yeah, it could deteriorate or it could just be rocky from the start. So think about
Mm,
like NFL players who are really great at their roles, but they suck as people. Right. And so
mm,
like they're not normally in the conversations of top 5 or top 10 of anything, right? And the same as well, like you could be really warm, but if people don't think you know what you need to know, then it's like, oh, that person's a nice person, but I don't want them on this project because they don't know anything. So it's a good balance of being warm and being a part of us to like actually being competent in what you know.
what you described just now just sounds like a Netflix culture memo. It's one of the best documents I've read about anything like this, and I talk about it too much actually, and I like the idea of it because they use the same exact analogy that you used, right? They say like
Mm,
we're not a family, we're a team, right?
right.
Meaning, and they break it down in many ways that you can't even imagine, because like they believe in like not just a culture of like excellence, they believe in a culture of continuous excellence, which is like why they use the analogy around like even as a team player, It can happen in moments where like you're not serving the team anymore, we'll move you on type stuff, right? So it's like I understand like it's mutually beneficial. We want you when you're on your A game, but if you can't do that anymore, unfortunately, as a team, you got to move on. And I like the idea of it because it always challenges you. I think there was even something there before where they kind of like took it out now, where it's like they even encourage people who work there to interview with other companies, right? The last time I read it, I think they took it out, which is like, if you find a better offer, talk to your leader about it, because we want to be able to match you or meet you wherever, like other people are valuing you at. So it's kind of like a two-way, right? It's like if you ever feel like you're more valuable than we're treating you, we want to kind of like meet you where you're at, which is great, right? Because a lot of people have a protectionist mindset, but they don't. And I think it's very valid, even combining now with everything you said. Another thing they said was also like, they don't like hyper successful jerks, right? Like you want, of course, we want winners all the time,
Right.
but we only want winners that work well within the context of the team. So
Yeah.
if you're disturbing the team dynamic, then we're more than happy to let you go. So again, understand that no matter how great you are, right, like you're still part of the Avengers at the end of the day.
So it's so great that you use that analogy, because that's where I am in life, right? Like I want friends who are superstars themselves, but when we're not being superstars, we could just be laid back, like at the bar or at the club or on the beach. Like, I know you're smart. That's why we're friends. But I need you to be a human. I need you to be a person. I need you to be warm. I need you to care about me as a person because I care about you as a person. So yes, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, and it's so, because ultimately I think when you think about the makings of the team, because the performance also matters, and I think that's even what my question was about. But I think you answered it properly, because at the end of the day, if you go to like a team that's on the bleeding edge or
Yeah.
that's doing exceptional things,
Yeah.
it can feel a little daunting, right? Like it
Hmm.
can be a little scary. But I think one of the places where I found solace is like, first of all, I'm here for a reason.
Yeah.
So even when everybody knows way more than me, even when everybody's contributing more than me, I
Hmm.
understand that there's a time factor to that, right?
Hmm.
And I think something that's also helped me is like understand, because like I've been in super high performing teams that are like super more technical than I am, even people who are PMs there. But one of the things that I understand that I have, that's a skill that most people don't have. I've been an entrepreneur multiple times. I've failed multiple times. I
Hmm.
don't approach fear in the same way that most people approach fear,
Right.
right? So it took me trying to start to understand what my thought process is. Also, it's like I work in corporate, but I'm not a corporate creature. Also, that's another thing. Not that there's anything bad in that, but it's like
Right.
there's such a risk fear that people have that
Hmm.
I don't have naturally. I've had to develop it a little bit, but it doesn't exist. Where things often always exist in binaries with me, where I'm thinking we don't have time to like dally on this. Like, can we? There's only two options: either we do this and we fail, or we don't do it, but we still fail. So it's like at that point, which failure is more scary?
Right.
And thinking about it that way, because you've probably experienced what I'm saying.
Hmm.
There's so many times where people know like this option is scary,
Hmm.
and because they know it's scary, and they know also because again, corporate is very cutthroat, where you're better off sometimes not taking that risk. People, of course, your team will not grow, things will not happen, but at least it didn't break because of you. Because then a lot of people are scared, like maybe I get three strikes.
Hmm.
Now, two things I've broken before, but they also forget that outside rewards also exist in those spaces
Hmm.
where people may remember that you broke something, but people also never forget who fixed that one problem that everybody remembers.
Hmm.
And a lot of the times, if you think about the winners are people who are not afraid of things breaking. In
Hmm.
fact, there's a story of an executive that I heard. Like this guy's in like early 40s, has been around like all the major tech companies doing a specific role.
Hmm.
And it's almost like the guy that everybody goes to when that problem exists,
Hmm.
right? So think about it, like that kind of person never got there because when they were making a decision, it's like, oh, you know what? Maybe we should try to scale it back and do it this way. He's never made a decision that way. You see what I'm saying? So
Hmm.
ultimately it's like, and this were the things that I understood. It's like now going back to again, I think you gave the most beautiful answer in the beginning. What is it that you're great at? Because when you can't even trust anything else, so that your technical skills may not be there to where you can contribute.
Hmm.
Your Maybe your understanding of the workspace may not be good. Maybe you don't even understand how to play the corporate politics that well.
Mm-hmm.
But you see that eye for design that you have. You see
Mm-hmm.
that creativity. You
Mm-hmm.
see that curiosity. Because sometimes you may not even add anything to the team beyond helping them find the blind spots.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because like there's literally like millions of dollar implementations that organizations set on, and they'll never turn back, because once they start putting that wheel in motion, nobody wants to put their hands up and say, oh, I'm the one who's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll literally spend 10 times more amount of money just to not want to take that responsibility. So it helps, for example, if you're the person on that team who says, hey, wait a minute, why did we decide to do it that way instead of this way?
Mm-hmm.
And now everybody's thinking, and now everybody's out is racing.
Yeah, I think you said something that I want to call out, and I hope that people didn't miss it, which is when you can identify what you're great at, especially in a team, and you can show up in that way, that is one of the ways that you stay around. When people
Mm.
can identify what you're great at and they actually enjoy you being great at that thing, if there's a conversation of somebody needs to leave from the team, there are going to be multiple people who are going to back you up because you know you're great at it. They appreciate you being great at it and they don't want to lose it from their team. And so, wow, thanks for saying that because you're right. You're right. I need people to really understand to rock in their zone of genius. And of course, we're great at a lot of things, but we waste time when we try to be great at too many things.
Mm. Okay. You're gonna need to run that back. You're gonna need to run, because I say that because like there's an idea about like this genius being the person who does a million and one different things, right?
Mhm.
But there's the other side. So no, you can't just say that in passing. You got to go back. You got to bring it back. Run it
Well,
back.
which part you want me to run back?
No, the part specifically about like honing in on that one thing. It doesn't have to be multiple things. It
Hmm.
has to, like, again, not to say, and I want to maybe clarify also, like, it's not that you can't be great at many things,
Oh
but
yeah.
that point specifically, it's like how to own in and be exceptional at that which you're great at.
So let me give you an example. So when I was at USA Today and we were working on a project that eventually won a Pulitzer, right? So my role was project manager, but I didn't stop there. Like I'm good and I'm great at that. But what I'm really great at outside of any environment or outside of any corporate environment is asking people questions that they never even thought to think about. Right. And it always comes from a place of like trying to make something better. So, for example, we were having a conversation about the content in one of the virtual reality experiences. And so I'm watching the video, and I get to the end of it, and I turn to like the creative director, and I said, "So y'all didn't get any interviews from female officers?" And the look on his face just dropped. So they had built at the time a model of a naval ship, right? So I wasn't there when they built the model, but I was there as they were piecing the pictures in or the videos. And so he looked at me. He was like, "Wow, Bianca, no one ever pointed that out, right?" And I was like, okay, is it possible that we could get interviews from the female officers? Because they were in the videos, they just didn't have any speaking parts, right?
Mm.
And so he was like, no, we can't go back. We got special permission to go on a naval ship to do the interviews, but no one even thought about asking the women officers. These aren't just like regular sailors or whatever. These are officers, right?
Mm.
And so he was like, no one thought about getting video of them speaking,
Mm.
and none of the male officers offered or suggested that we interview any of the female officers. So it took a woman
To
looking
see
at
it.
the footage to like, wait, where's the interviews of the female officers? Like, one, I didn't know it was that many on a ship. And I want to hear what their experience is of being a woman on a ship who's an officer who has other sailors who are underneath her and then having to respond to superiors. And so kind of going back to your thing about being really great is that whatever you're really great at may not always be like a quote unquote corporate skill, right? But it can help to complement something else that is. But like you knowing what you're great at, like from them, people would ask me my opinion all the time. What do you think about this? Or is there something we're missing that we're not seeing? And that I became that person on that team.
And to kind of like, I mean, that you kind of like put it so beautifully in the way that I see it too, because ultimately, if you think about that piece, it's
Mm.
often the extra that makes the extraordinary. Like
Mm-hmm.
you could put in all the work, it could be
Right.
99%, but if it's not 100%, it's not. And a
Yeah.
lot of the times, like, you know, people have so many blind spots. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing. Like now you start to see all of this thing. Oh, we can't go back. There's no permission. There's this, is that.
Mm-hmm.
Think about even building that idea from the scratch, from the ground up.
Mm-hmm.
Like how much more better it could be if you just have more more diverse perspectives. And that's
Yes.
the thing. It's like literally like because you have those decision making where
Mm-hmm.
everybody just accepts and says this is what we do. That's another beauty about like if you're new to a team,
Yeah.
something you can bring that is different.
Mm-hmm.
Again, groupthink can be a good thing, right? Because on the one hand, it means like we have a culture where like we all kind of like speaking one language, and it means we can move a lot
Mm-hmm.
faster sometimes where we're in that unison. The
Mm.
danger of groupthink is that the pitfall is
Yes.
that we're also all thinking the same thing. Meaning, if there's anything that's out of line, nobody even sees it. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
sees a word. So
Mm-hmm.
it's always like I'm always excited when somebody new joins a team for that specific
Mm-hmm.
reason. It's like we need a fresh pair of eyes to just come look at it. Because sometimes when you're new, when you have all the questions, that's when you can add a lot of value. Because a lot of times we're validating a lot of our assumptions or invalidating them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it takes someone, in fact, to your point, the biggest skill of a product manager is curiosity. Simple,
Mm-hmm.
plain simple. In
Right.
fact, you ask about the multiple whys, and the best product managers ask those questions. In fact, it's this idea that's called first principles thinking. And it's
Mm.
very important because there's so many like reductive thinking that we do as human beings
Yeah.
because and I'll give an example, literally. Like
Okay.
so when I was younger, there was a I grew up in Nigeria, by the way, and
Mm-hmm.
there's we had a coin called Naira, which is like 1 Naira, which is like the lowest denominator. But
Mm-hmm.
then we have okay. I'll use an example, an American example, just to bring it closer. Imagine if a dollar was a coin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then as a kid, I heard a math class that 10 dimes made $1, right?
Right.
So in my mind, one day I tried to do like a science experiment and try to break the dollar coin to reveal the 10 dimes.
I love it.
Because in my mind, like it had to be inside. I
Right.
didn't understand it was just like a unit of calculation. But
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes, like that kind of like cute thinking is what you need sometimes
Yeah.
because a lot of times you guys have jumped sometimes multiple reasoning loops to get to that decision
Mm-hmm.
that you need sometimes someone to come break it apart to help you find new ways, right? And
Yeah.
to use like not everybody's probably favorite example right now, but Tesla, when they finally solved the car battery problem, it
Mm-hmm.
was that they broke the idea around batteries because when people talk about batteries powering cars in the first place, they
Mm-hmm.
just thought about the modular batteries, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the trucks have the bigger batteries, the cars, and people were thinking in that way. They took the thinking back to the units, right? Because the containers were arbitrary, like somebody created that. So
Mm-hmm.
do away with the containers, go back to the units. How much does it cost? And by taking it back to first principles, they were able to build the battery or the idea behind the battery that now powers like that made this idea of like electric cars like a reality.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times like that's the value, another value that I think someone new on a team can bring.
Yeah. Oh my God. You said so much in that, right? And kind of, tackling or jumping on the whole group think and thinking so much in group think that it leads you up to a point, right, where you've made a decision and you're like, we can't find any other way to get out of this because there's no way to solve it. And it's like, no, that's not true, right? Like you need to pull back all the different decisions that you've made up until this point and get to the very basis of this. And then we need to have a whole new conversation of like, what are the things that are actually constraining us? Because we can redesign something that doesn't go down that same path. So I absolutely love that. I find that sometimes, even with our own clients, people have gotten so far down the path of what they think the solution should be and kind of going to innovation advising, right? That they're so locked into it looking a certain way. And so when I come in and I start peeling back the layers and asking the questions of like, all right, but tell me what you're trying to accomplish. And so, starting from that point, and we could be in a completely different place than where they thought we would be because we went back to the beginning of it. So yeah, no, you asked really great questions. Are you going to be an innovation advisor?
Bring me on. And I completely having a ball with this conversation. I actually forgot to put this PSA. We hope you are enjoying the conversation. We only have a few minutes of it left, but feel free to leave any questions on the chat about AI, VR, innovation, all of that good stuff. Bianca will be more than excited to answer the questions I have.
Definitely. Do you feel like a lot of companies, not just US companies, but companies around the world, are kind of like locking themselves into solutions that they don't need to have because they refuse to get out of groupthink?
I think it's a problem with many people and many companies. And it's kind of like even how we live our lives, right? Because if you think about it, like even bias, right? Very negative connotation of word, but it's not so negative in its application, right? Like, we all know not to put our fingers in fire. We all know not to go to certain parts of town at certain times.
You're right.
Like if I paint a picture, it's so funny. Like I took a course a long time ago that kind of like, it did this like descriptive thing, and I came to the conclusion, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of like said, imagine like you were like, you woke up in a hotel, like you find yourself in like this bathtub and like there's ice in the bath, and like so somebody wrote with a lipstick on the mirror, like, call this number. What color is the lipstick?
Red.
Exactly, right? Yeah. But I didn't say it. The point is, we make mental jumps, right, based on certain things because it leads us to those conclusions. So the problem is, so that's just a human, and like this is human evolution, right? Like, if I'm doing like that in my course right now, organizational behavior, my MBA, but that's the thing, like we all make these decisions, and that's where like I think it's bread and butter for someone like you because you can peel that back, right? It's like, can we go to the very beginning? And a lot of people also like, and this was something I had to fight, was not always being fixed on the solution. Focus on the problems. That's where the answers are. Because just like you were asking a minute ago, right? It's like, what are you trying to do? Because a lot of times people will say, oh, but what if we plug GPT into this backend system and then we do like a Zapier integration and then it goes into Salesforce and then it connects to LinkedIn and then it does this and then it does that. But it's like, wait, why do we even need to do all that?
Correct.
Right? Like, because let's take it back one step. Are you do you want the technology or do you want the solution? Because those are not the same thing. So it's like, how do we take it back? And a lot of times, like when people have it takes a lot of humility. It takes a lot of discomfort, right? Like deciding like, you know what, if I don't have all the answers, it's still fine. But the question then is like, how many people are willing to be there?
That right there is that. I literally was having a conversation this week where I said to someone, I'm going to ask you these questions, and it is totally okay for you to say, I don't know. Right? I think too many times people feel like they always should have an answer. And I think it's a pitfall of corporate America to put the expectation on people to always have answers, and that's how you end up with really crappy stuff at the end because someone made
Mhm.
up an answer to something that they really did not know, right?
Mhm.
Or they didn't do the due diligence to really figure out which way we should go. It was just like in the moment somebody asked me a question, I answered. Um, I think that there's something beautiful and also powerful about a person who can acknowledge that they don't know the answer to something and just say, I don't know. And I can get back to you if I figure it out. Or I don't know, but what do you suggest? So,
Mhm. So I know we're kind of like coming to the end, and I
mhm.
have one more question. Then
Okay.
we'll go to like either your shout outs or if you have any last piece of advice or
Okay.
both.
Okay.
But final question is
Yeah.
for any. I know I kind of like had asked a variation, um, but for anyone looking to break into tech today, just general, whether it's not even innovation,
Hmm.
what are the beyond figuring out what like who they are, what are the practical steps, or maybe even using your own journey, what
Hmm.
were the things that you did, or if you had to do it all over again today,
Yeah.
how would you like what show me the journey from starting to getting your first job.
So here's the thing. I start falling in love with computers when I was 10. So I already knew that this was going to be the path. I didn't know how it would all shape up. I couldn't imagine that at 10. But at 10, I got my first computer. Then by middle school, I was playing like Carmen San Diego. I'm not even sure if you know what that is. It was on floppy disk. Then I went to high school. I was starting to like code in like C and Pascal. So like my journey is very atypical than most people, and especially like a little Black girl who grew up in North Philadelphia, which is a very a neighborhood that didn't have a lot of resources. So my journey is very, very unique. Um, I think that for the person who is interested in tech, like I said, now everything is tech. So it's a much easier path to get to wherever you think you would want to go. But I would say first is even if you don't want to do the work or it's hard to really ask yourself the questions of like who I am, look at where you spend your money. Start there, right? So like for example, if you are a sneakerhead and you love sneakers and you have a collection, you got all the Jordans or whatever, and you want to get into tech, start looking at what that looks like. Could you be a virtual sneaker designer? Could you be someone who works on designing the software that design the sneakers? Like look at whatever your interest is. If you don't get a chance to kind of do the who am I type exercise, just pay attention to where you spend your money, because I think that is a true testament to what we care about is where you spend your money.
Hmm. That is so valid. And I, to be honest, I like the combination of those two answers because
Mhm.
I think this is more real because even the opportunities, it's so interesting. Like you were saying that as you were giving the example, I'm almost saying, oh, build an e-commerce platform or do
Mhm.
this or do that. But we're starting from the same assumption, right? You like sneakers. And we've already seen, like you're seeing the opportunities that you're seeing, I'm seeing the opportunities that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And that could be the same thing too, right?
Right.
For that next person who's like finding that thing and like starting to work on that because ultimately I think that's the valuable thing. It's like your education doesn't have to be typical, right? Like
Yeah.
you can start to teach yourself, and going off of passion is one of the easiest ways.
Yeah.
Because now, if you start to ask, "Oh, I love sneakers. What kind of like business models can I build around it, or like how can
Mhm.
I?" That may lead you down a rabbit hole of becoming a software engineer or an AI ML engineer or a data analyst, where it's like, "Oh, I want to see all the sneakers that exist,"
Yeah.
and accidentally, you're picking up all these amazing skills
Mhm.
on the way.
Mhm. Yeah, it was yes to everything you just said. I think that people underestimate their natural interest, and if you just try to figure out how to do that thing within your natural interest, you wind up teaching yourself a whole bunch of stuff that you didn't intend to teach yourself.
Yep. Yep.
Mhm.
100% right. It's so funny. It's like a lot of the things that you're saying, literally lines up with what my guest who I was talking about earlier was saying, which was
Mm.
also for her. She was trying to build a Shopify website. She got
Okay.
so much into the code that she
Mhm.
forgot about what she wanted to sell in the first place.
But with that, it helped her land a job at Netflix.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
So, I actually had a friend who did a lot of like she was self-taught as a like a designer, but
Mm,
she went to school for like masters of higher ed or something like that. And she kept pursuing the design route. And so she wound up becoming like an executive, a high-end designer for like a corporation, like a particular initiative that they had, but it had nothing to do with what she went to school for. Like she just loved it. She figured out how to teach herself certain things and then she created her career. And I want to say she went from maybe like 40 or $50,000 in New York City to then making I think 120 or 150, all because she changed careers based off of interest that she self-taught herself. So
wow,
yeah.
that's such an inspirational story.
Mhm. Yeah.
So what we're coming to the end. What are the final shout outs that you have? Maybe you also have a Netflix special coming out.
I
Or
don't. I don't have a Netflix special, but what I wound up doing, putting in the chat, if you could put this in the show notes somewhere,
okay.
it's just a quick survey to help people figure out if they're actually ready to become like an innovation advisor.
Yeah.
To kind of put yourself on that track, because I know we talked a little bit about that.
Yep.
So that's the only shout out. Like I want people to start reassessing themselves, reassessing their interests to figure out where their talents are best used and where
Mm,
they can get you the most money so you don't have to work multiple jobs. But I just love when people are able to work in their zone of genius and it's delightful. I'm not saying that it needs to be easy, but hopefully that it provides value in some way and that it provides you the money that you need to take care of yourself and take care of your families. And I just want people to push themselves. I think too many times we spend a lot of time wasting time, so endless hours on TikTok, endless hours on Instagram, endless hours of just doing nonsense or YouTube, right? And it's just like all that time that you're looking through hours and hours and thousands of videos, you literally could be teaching yourself a new skill.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much. We're definitely going to leave the link in the chat for people to check it out
Okay.
once they're watching. But I really, really appreciate you coming to share your amazing journey with us on the podcast. It's really been a pleasure having you.
Yeah.
And to everybody who came out to rock with us tonight, really appreciate you. Um, we're going to be here again next Thursday with another episode of Working in Tech.
uh,
Uh, Bianca, any final salutes to the audience?
yeah, I would just say make this the year that you finally do the things you've been talking about, you've been wanting to do.
Hmm. Okay, okay, that's definitely the one. I know you dropped a lot of gems tonight, but that's the one.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's the one.
have an amazing evening, everyone.
Okay.
Really appreciate you joining us. See you again next week.
All right. Thanks.